Hello, I'm Corey Petrick, an educator from Thaden School in Bentonville, Arkansas. In 2018, I was brought on to develop the foundation for a storytelling program called Reels, an idea conceived by Clayton Marsh, Thaden's founding head of school. His vision included 3 signature programs, Meals, Wheels, and Reels, which serve as a conceptual framework for these initiatives. The Reels program at its core is a storytelling program designed to extend beyond traditional modes of storytelling typically found in a high school English class. In today's world, storytelling transcends the written word. While the skills learned in English, such as verbal storytelling and narrative structure, remain foundational, contemporary storytelling incorporates a wide range of mediums such as podcast, social media, film, television, graphic design, photography, and other time-based or visual formats. The ability to weave these diverse mediums together to create a cohesive narrative is becoming increasingly relevant, not just in creative fields, but in all types of professions, like engineering, medicine, law, architecture, even accounting. Regardless of their career path, students benefit from learning how to tell compelling stories that strengthen their ability to communicate and connect with others. Now, 6 years into the development of the Reels program, I'm thrilled to welcome Kate Tindall to this podcast. Kate has been a student of the program since 7th grade and is part of the first cohort to experience the full breadth of courses offered within Reels. Over the years, the program has evolved, but Kate has journeyed through it all, ultimately completing a thesis with me during her senior year. Kate exemplifies the type of student the Reels program aims to nurture, a versatile, thoughtful, and impactful storyteller. What's particularly exciting about her story is that she isn't pursuing storytelling as her primary focus in college. Yet the skills she has developed through the program are shaping her path in unexpected ways. Today we'll hear more about her journey, including her recent experiences at Thaden and what lies ahead for her future. Welcome, Kate.
Hello.
Let's talk about just like your first experience coming to Thaden in 7th grade, how you felt, what it was like for you when you first came to Thaden.
Mm-hmm. I'd heard of Thaden quite a lot before I came to Thaden because it was this new idea of a school. And so 5th and 6th grade, it was an idea in my brain that I could go to Thaden. And then at the end of 6th grade, I knew that I was actually coming. And I knew of the Reels, Wheels, and Meals program. And on my first day of school in 7th grade, they took us around every different program, so Meals, Wheels, and Reels, and let us just try out quickly what each program was. And then throughout the course of the year, each trimester we would try a new different program. So I don't remember what order, but we would definitely try each one of them. And I think that was a great opportunity to let us little 7th graders get a sneak peek into the different programs that Thaden had to offer, because we obviously didn't dive deep into it, but I know at least in Reels, we did a podcast unit, we did photography, I think we did film, obviously, but it was just a peek into it, which I think was a great place to start because it sparked what we could do in the future, and it made me excited about what there was to offer.
When you had that first introduction, were we in our buildings at that time, or were we still?
No, we were in the trailer parks I think your room was just your Reels room. I don't think it was shared with anyone else. A lot of the classrooms were, but I remember there was just cameras and tripods, and it looked very cool. And growing up, no other school lets you see, as a young kid, 7th grade is young. They don't allow you to really get hands-on with cameras and things like that. And so walking in for the first time and seeing all these big cameras and the sound box thing was insanely cool because you never get to see that as a kid.
Then we built some buildings.
Yes.
The programs got bigger. We went through a pandemic.
Yes.
One thing I focused on during the pandemic, because it was very odd, was, we went from trailers, like you said, to we built these buildings. My classroom literally got finished building 3-4 weeks before the pandemic, and we go into lockdown. So I built this soundstage. We don't get to use it. So I focused a lot on curriculum during the pandemic and tweaking curriculum and getting it to where I thought, like, just thinking about, like, from 7th grade to 12th grade, where do they go? And so for me, the pandemic was great in that sense of, like, I got to kind of be here for a little bit, see it all, focus on my curriculum, and then come back around. So we're going to skip through the pandemic since that was a rough part for all of us. We get back after the pandemic and we're starting to get into a more routine. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about your relationship between Reels and meals, and then about your first experiences now on the new campus with those two things and how that made you feel.
I think the new campus definitely brought more like opportunities to the Reels program as well, because there's a lot more programs and things like that you can have in this cool space than in a tiny trailer box. And I think coming back, I think we came back 9th grade, and yes, that was still kind of COVID-y, but initially then it was kind of the first time I saw like all the things I could do. Like I knew I was really interested in photography. And so for my project, I was in short form 1, which is all about filmmaking. But instead of making a film, I went to the square every day and took pictures of the square to see how it would transition throughout the year. And that was my kind of project. And that was kind of also, I think the Thaden Reels program is a lot about connecting with the community. And I think it's probably one of the programs at Thaden that does that the most, because if you're making a film, yes, it's cool to make a film on someone in Thaden, but it's interesting to go out into the community and talk to other people. And so I think that was the first time that Thaden allowed me to do that as well. And I remember walking to the square with, I think, you, Mr. Petrick, to take pictures and things like that. And I think that was the first like aspect of community-wise. And then I also think that was a night as a freshman, that's the first year that you kind of get a bit more freedom to pick and choose your, like, what classes you take. And on the, like, form in 8th grade, I immediately checked yes to short form 1.
And then also talk about how your relationship to meals too during that time, because meals also got a nice new space.
Yes.
and it also connects to the community. So just talk a little bit into that.
Yeah, in the trailers we'd done like cooking classes where we'd go harvest vegetables and cook them. But then once the kitchen opened, it was a new idea of like culinary competitions and this like business side of culinary, which we got to take. So I took a culinary class in 9th grade where for the first time I got to go compete in culinary, and I'd never done anything like that before. And with the great like facilities and architecture that we had within the buildings, I was able to practice so much. And then I went and did the competition. I was the youngest person there, and then I won it, which was crazy because I was 14 years old competing against like 18-year-olds. And ever since then, that really kicked off for me the meals program as well. And since then we had culinary operation classes where we learn about how restaurants and businesses and how even a school can produce as much food as a school produces a day and at the high quality that it produces it at. And so, yeah.
So you mentioned architecture. So
Yes.
let's move to architecture. Architecture is something that you are going to major in college.
Mm-hmm.
It's something you've been into for a long time. Talk about how maybe you were influenced by architecture before this campus. What did that look like? And then after you've been on this campus for a while, how did architecture of this campus influence you? And then how did you get to where you were with choosing your thesis?
Mm-hmm. So growing up, I'd always loved architecture, and I say this a lot, but I play video games just to build the houses, which now I tell people and they think I'm crazy because they think that's the boring part of the video games, but for me that was exciting. And I also grew up in Europe, so I was able to travel a lot and see a lot of cool places that not everyone gets to see in cool architectural spaces. And then when I moved to America, I really got to see that architecture was more than just like a cool thing that I like to play with. I took an architecture intensive at Thaden School with Miss Balthus, where for a whole week we got to design a community outreach space and I think a house and go around all these cool architects. And I think that was eye-opening. And then that summer I was able to take the 1-week design camp at the University of Arkansas, which was again just like a small little peek into it. And I think that was the summer before my junior year. And that kind of sparked an idea in my brain that it could be more than just a passion and I could actually go and do this as a career. Well, throughout the junior year, I was able to secure an internship with Marlon Blackwell Architects, who designed Thaden. that was incredible because it just opened my eyes again to like what an actual career could look like. And I also went to the advanced design camp at the University of Arkansas. But I think with Thaden especially, starting at the trailers, I got to see like every single aspect of the buildings grow from the ground up. And even while we were at the trailers, we got to see the drawings. And I know Dr. Hirschbach let us pick the color of the pack. As the Thaden buildings have grown, I think I've grown with them. I definitely love the buildings, probably a lot more than a lot of people do, but I think I just have a good connection to them. And then with having an internship at Marlon Blackwell Architects, I got to learn a lot about their thought process and design aspects behind the buildings. And I think the one that I found interesting is, and I was talking to another architect about this too, is that when they went to high school, buildings were like designed to not have windows so kids wouldn't get distracted by the outside world. And I just found that crazy because Thaden, if you've ever been, is filled with windows. There's not a room without a window practically. And that it just ignites, I think, the educational experience even more because, yes, you could get distracted by watching someone walk their dog through campus, but you're also, I find myself staring out of the windows to think about ideas and connect, I think definitely with nature as well, and that's what the architects said as well. And that's also kind of in the Northwest Arkansas, like, I think community values is we're quite a natural community. There's a lot of biking and nature involved, and I think the architects of Thaden did a great job of bringing that into the school as well. And it's also a great community space because there's no gates or walls or anything. You can just walk through it. And that, again, brings a connection to the like community aspect of Thaden as well in the buildings.
Nice. And so then you come into your senior year.
Yes.
And you're thinking about your thesis. Tell me about how you got to where you were with your idea of your thesis.
Yeah. I think growing up, I always knew I wanted to do a job that helped people. And architecture, yes, it's helping people if you build a cool house. But I think I wanted to do something kind of like Thaden as well. Like Thaden helps people. It's more of an architecture project for like the community. My idea was to create a film in the film class about architecture and different projects within Northwest Arkansas and how it pushes community and like the greater community as well. And so that was the end of junior year. And me and Mr. Petrick, we kind of sat down, thought about some of the projects that we could do. I don't think we had necessarily picked the exact ones, but we like had a good idea in our brains. And then throughout the summer, I was able to sit and think more about the different projects and going to design camp and my internship with Marlon Blackwell Architects. It helped me narrow in on like what I exactly wanted to do. I wanted to interview architects to see their thought process behind it because, yes, it's an architect's job to design a building and they'll get paid to do it, but I wanted to see the deeper connection that they had to the buildings and the actual thoughts that they wanted to put in behind it and see if it was successful and like how it worked out. And so for my senior thesis, I went and interviewed architects for 4 different projects and got their opinions on the design process, but then also the success of their projects and what they thought about it.
Now let's talk about the creation of your thesis. You have this idea. And you don't just go out and start filming, right? There's lots of pieces that happen before you even get to the filming aspect of your project. Let's talk about the process that leads up to before you even turn on the camera the first time. And what are some things you learned through that?
Yeah. And so going through the Thaden Reels program, one thing that's kind of stapled into you from the beginning is a pitch deck and how to create a good pitch deck that gets your point across of the film that you want to create. So that was kind of the first step of something I knew I needed to do. And to create a pitch deck, I needed to research the projects that I'd chosen. So for the first, I think, couple months, the first trimester, all I did was research the different projects and the different, like, who designed it, when did they design it, why did they design it, things like that. And so for 3 of the projects, I created a bibliography, an annotated bibliography for them. And that was a great way for me, because yes, I know about these projects because I've grown up in Arkansas, kind of, and they're buildings that everyone knows about, but it was a great way for me to learn deeper about who the architects were, why they just wanted to design it, and then also to learn more about the architecture firms as well and their well-being and like what they want and their mission for their architecture program. And that was great because it kind of drew a connection to each of these projects that have like a community outreach. That architecture firms have kind of the same mission and goal to create those community places and elevate the human experience, I think was what a lot of them said. So I did those research papers and put together a pitch deck of what I wanted my films to look like, the structure that I wanted, the overall reason of why I was doing the project, kind of a synopsis on how like the Northwest Arkansas area is growing, things like that. And in the pitch deck too, I went deep into, like I did a little overview on like what the project was itself and who I was interviewing for that as well. And so that was kind of the first thing that I did really before I even went out and filmed anything, because without that, like you would go out and film something, but you don't know what you're looking for. Well, with like doing research, you know what you want to capture and things like that, instead of just being like a blind bird, not knowing anything.
Yeah. The next step was like actually going out into your community and connecting with them, and talk about that experience. And did any of the prior things like in the pitch deck and building that kind of docket of information help you navigate actually connecting with the people in the community?
Mm-hmm. I think connecting with people in the community was probably one of the hardest things that I did, because I'm not necessarily the most confident person. So sending an email, I guess, is a little less scary than calling someone up. But I sent a lot of emails to these people. And when I sent the emails to the architects, I made sure to tell them about my project, why I was doing it, that I was interested in further in architecture, and the whole reason I was doing the project. And luckily for me, a lot of them were quite on board for it. So once I emailed them, I then had to set up a date to go actually meet them in person. And again, that was quite scary, because you've never met these people before in your life. And for me, like, I love architecture so much that I would research about these people, and then there'd be little celebrities in my brain, like, oh my God, they design these cool places and I'm about to go meet them. This is so scary. But then they're also just people who do something that I love. And so I would go meet them, and I'd be nervous at the beginning, but then by the end, it's like, I've met these cool people. What was the rest of the question?
And so you went out and you met some people, and some were easy, like you said.
Yes.
Were there any challenges?
Yeah. I think with challenges, there was one project that I wanted to complete, which I didn't get to include in my senior thesis, which was the ledger building. The ledger building from the beginning, I think, was the biggest project that I wanted to include. And it also, it was a very grand project in terms of scale. And the issue, or like not issue, but the factor from the beginning that we had to factor in is that this was one of the only projects that you couldn't necessarily just get into. You had to, even if I was just walking on the street, you have to go buy a pass to go into the project and into the building. So that was the first aspect of like, how was I actually going to get into the building and film it? And I was lucky to have, there was some drone footage of it already that we had. But then it was also a factor of like, who was I going to interview? Because the ledger building wasn't just one architecture firm. There was many, many different architecture firms. And one thing I based my project off is that I wanted all the architects to be local architects, because Northwest Arkansas is such a, like, it's a growing place. So I wanted it to come from the roots of where it's, like, Arkansas was grown from. And the issue was that Mullen Blackwell Architects is the local architecture firm. And they also designed Thaden. And I didn't want to include two projects from the same architecture firm. But there was also another group, the Callahan-Haruchi group. And from my research initially, I believe it said their address was in Bentonville. They were a local architecture firm. And when I was emailing with them, they said, yes, we're the local firm that worked on it. And then when it came time to interviewing them, they were not in town. Their firm was, I think, in Kansas City, and they were nowhere close to Northwest Arkansas. So that, first of all, made it hard to like film them at all, because it was hard to plan them to come here. And obviously I can't be like, come right now. They have lives, and that was something too, is I had to work around the architects' like lives, because they're doing something great for me and they're helping me out. So I can't be bossy and tell them exactly what I want them to do. So you have to be adaptive. So that didn't work out with them, just timing wise and things like that. It just didn't work. But then I went and talked to Mullen Blackwell Architects, because I knew that they had a connection to it, and they put me in touch with kind of the main architecture firm who worked on it. I think it's Rohingya Architects, and they're based out in Mexico. And I tried to get an interview with them, and it just didn't work out with like the time difference and everything being like, I don't know how far away, not thousands of miles,
Yeah,
thousands of miles away. So it just didn't work with that aspect too.
Yeah.
But that just showed that maybe the ledger, for what I was trying to do at this moment, it wasn't the right project to fit in at that point in time.
Yeah.
But definitely in the future, when I'm continuing this, I would love to reach back out to Rohingya Architects. And I think too, if I continue this project, I should focus it out into not just local architects as well, and focus it on people further out in the community.
One moment I remember that was a little bit of a hurdle for you, and we'll bring this back up, is that, you know, sometimes, like you said, we work around other people's lives. And we showed up at the Applegate house to film the Applegate house, and we were there for a bit.
Yes.
And someone was a little late.
Yes.
And I remember your father saying, "Why don't you just call him?" And how did you feel about that? Because this was a moment where you had to take a different step.
Yes. Usually I'm pretty okay at talking to people on the phone, but that's if it's like if it's a positive conversation, like nothing bad will happen. But this particular person was quite late to offshoot, and I had met, I think, can I say it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Greg Herman, he's a professor at the University of Arkansas, and so during my design camp, I met him, and I went and sat in his office, and we talked about Faye Jones for quite a while. So I've met him before, and so I think that helped a little bit, having to call him up and ask him where he was.
Yeah.
But it was quite terrifying because it was like, well, what if we got the time wrong, or we didn't, but I didn't want him to like get angry at us or for him to feel bad. And so that was a big hurdle. And my dad kept on pushing me and be like, okay, call him up. And I was like, 5 more minutes, give him 5 more minutes. And in the end, I went and called him, and he's like, oh my gosh, I thought it was, did he think it was another day? Or
Yeah, there was something.
There was something going on that he just completely forgot. And so in the end, it was all fine, and he was very apologetic, and we were not in the wrong at all, and I shouldn't have been scared. And in the end, it helped our project because we actually got to film it. And I think with the Applegate house too, it's a private residency, so that one, we kind of had to film it on that day. Like, it was hard to get in there in the first place. And so I think that was a hurdle that I needed to jump over for the project to be successful and to actually get it. And in my opinion, the Applegate house film is one of my favorites that I made. So I'm quite glad. And it turned out really well, even though he was like 2 hours late. But we did go get a nice coffee and have fun in the meantime.
Yeah, we pivoted and we did what we needed to do. And I think the way you handled that situation too was like, once he got there, did he feel annoyed or was he uncomfortable during the interview?
I don't think so.
No, it went really, really well because of the way you handled yourself in that situation. And like you said, it's like you weren't mad at him and you were just excited that he gave you his time and he came and he did it.
Yeah.
And so I think you really overcame that little bump in the road really well. And I think the film turned out wonderful.
Yes.
So you filmed all these films, you did your thesis, they all turned out great. I'm sure the viewers can go and watch all these. We'll put them up for people to watch. You have chosen to go to the University of Arkansas. Mm-hmm. That professor is going to be one of your professors. Yes. I remember during the thesis presentation that he was very excited about it. And one thing that he said was, how can you continue this? Mm-hmm. And I know that's something you also had already thought about. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Is this something that might live on? Yeah,
I definitely want it to live on because it's been so fun to do, but it's also given me a foot into the architecture community in Northwest Arkansas. And not that I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years, if I'll still be in Northwest Arkansas, but definitely having these films and interviewing these people give me a foot in, I think. And so if I continue it, I've met so many cool people already that I'll meet even more interesting and architecture people. And I think at the University of Arkansas too, it will introduce me to even more projects that I'll be able to spark in my mind. Oh, I can make a film on that one. And I think when at my senior thesis defense, Greg Herman was talking about like what I could do more. And I think I just answered the questions like, oh, I'll just continue it and the program will bring me many different opportunities to go see things. But I also think there's opportunities to minor in things and minor in different aspects. So I could minor in interior design or I could minor in film. And so then I'd still have a foot into like the film community in like Fayetteville as well. And I think that's definitely something I've got to consider. Yes, I can do this project myself and just continuing it myself, but how can I also push to make them a little more, not like, I don't know, but that's something I'm thinking about.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
I really look forward to seeing you continue making these films. I enjoyed watching them as your thesis advisor, and I probably wouldn't have done this project if I wasn't into architecture too and design and things like that. So it was a really fun experience for me, and I just thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yes, thank you.